There we go. How are you today? It's Mike Rasmussen, CPA Straight Talk for Small Business on Wednesday, August 19th. Welcome. So, what is today? We're going to go through the final executive order that was issued by Donald Trump on August 8th. And I'm going to walk you through how it came about, how you find it, and then what I look at as a follow-up so that you can take any action that you might need to do as a small business owner, if anything, on that executive order. So as Congress possibly is coming back, the House is coming back as of Saturday to deal with the United States Postal Service funding. I'm going to focus you on the executive orders. Today is going to be the executive order that was issued on August 8th. Now, this is different than a memorandum, but it's issued by the White House. So here we go. Follow my screen, if you will, and let me jump through. Okay, so this is from the White House. These are presidential actions. You can scroll down by date, and you can come down to August 8th. Here was the initial memorandum on authorizing the other needs, which we went through a couple days ago, that had to do with the unemployment. Here is the memorandum on deferring payroll tax obligations, of which we are going to go through tomorrow. And here is actually an executive order on fighting the spread of COVID-19 by providing assistance to renters and homeowners. So then if you actually go in, and here is the executive order. And I'm going to jump directly to, I have this in what's called Adobe PDF, so I can search around. So bottom line, this is what was issued as an executive order on August 8th. What is it all about? These executive orders go through and talk about what the purpose was. And the CDC and Human Health and Human Services. These are organizations I refer to. They're United States services that take executive orders and have to go act. This is a statement. The growing and disproportionate unemployment rates for some racial and ethnic minority groups during COVID-19 pandemic may lead to greater risk of eviction and homelessness of sharing of housing. Eviction, remember that. Further, homelessness poses multiple challenges that can exacerbate and amplify the spread of COVID-19. Homeless shelters are often crowded, making social distancing difficult. Many persons experiencing homelessness are older or have underlying medical conditions, placing them at higher risk for severe illness. So, the CARES Act imposed a temporary moratorium on evictions, there's that word again, of certain renters subject to certain conditions. That moratorium has now expired. So, what I did then is I went back to the CARES Act and I searched for eviction, temporary moratorium on eviction filings, and you can go through, and when I get to moratorium on eviction filings, and I scroll down to what is that? It's 120 days period beginning on the date of enactment of the act, which is the CARES Act. So this expired July 27th. So then what I did is I went to the HEROES Act. This is what was passed in the House in May 15th of this year. And so here it was, the emergency rental assistance in section 110201 of the, and what does it talk about? Authorization of appropriations. This is the HEROES Act proposing for authorizations for $100 billion. So that would be $100 billion out of the $3.4 trillion. So $100 billion deep down here on page 954 of an additional amount for grants under the Emergency Solutions Grant to be used for providing short or medium-term assistance with rent and related costs, including tenant paid utility costs, rent arrears, fees charged, in accordance. And so then it gets into the definition of at-risk or homelessness. So in the HEROES Act, the House of Representatives proposed $100 billion. You can read a little bit further, but bottom line is this was never acted on in the HEALS package. How do I know? So then I went to the HEALS package and I typed in eviction for, remember, here are the 8 bills that were introduced in the Senate, which are supposed to be a follow-up or to a House bill, which is the HEROES Act, which is actually an act. And I typed in simple. I went through 43, 23, 21, 20, 19, 18, 7, and search for eviction. And the word eviction does not come in any of the Senate bills in the Senate to follow up with the HEROES Act. So why do I go through all this? So that leaves us to the CARES Act introduced it. It expired. This moratorium is expired. Something had to be done. The HEROES Act proposed $100 billion. The 8 Senate bills did not address eviction. And so here it is. Responses. The Secretary of Health and Human Services and Director of the City shall consider whether there are any measures temporarily halting residential evictions of any tenants for failure to pay rent or reasonably necessary to prevent the further spread. So what President Trump did is basically directed the Secretary of Health and Human Services and CDC to consider any measures temporarily halting. Are there any? He is directing the other departments to comment on his executive order and get back to him, because the HEROES Act proposing $100 billion is sitting stale. It wasn't addressed by the Senate 8 bills and the HEALS package of 8 bills that presented. So he took action. He also is directing the Secretary of Treasury and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, which is HUD, shall identify any and all available federal funds to provide temporary financial assistance to renters and homeowners who, as a result of the financial hardships caused by COVID-19, are struggling to meet their monthly rental or mortgage obligations. So the rest of it here is just details. So then what I did, I wanted to know, has there been any action on Secretary of Health and Human Services, Director of the CDC, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development? Fast forward, no. So specifically related to at least any information that I can find. What I do next is then I go to the Department of Treasury. I go to specifically the press releases, statements and remarks and readouts, and find, is there any, this happens to be on August 9th. There was a statement by the Secretary of Stephen Mnuchin on the executive orders basically saying, issue the following statement today. I am pleased that President Trump has taken action to ensure that economic relief continues to be provided by America, workers and families. Implementation of the CARES Act, which is delivering meaningful results for American people. Now, what I would expect is that there will be a comment to the executive order. Okay? So in the executive order, President Trump asked one of the departments in the Department of Treasury to define additional funding. In addition, he asked the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So I went to the HSS, I went to the same thing with the CARES Act Relief Fund, trying to find anything if there had been progress or executive order to address on August 8th that President Trump. I was able to find one of the biggest was Operation Warp Speed, which is actually is to produce and deliver 300 million doses. That's a side note, but I was looking for evictions. Then I went to the department of Housing and Urban Development. And on the latest that I saw here, I would search any press and I would find a little bit more on guidance for issuance of guidance for coronavirus relief funds. Nothing there that specifically addresses the executive order. So where I'm at where we are right now, back to the executive order. So this executive order was issued on August 8th. It basically defined why, and it was the temporary moratorium from the CARES Act, expired July 27th. President Trump jumped in and said, let us define how we can extend that. And at least right here, and you can see, has since announced that the enterprise will extend foreclosure until at least August 31 of 2020. So he is asking different departments, such as the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Director of CDC, Secretary of the Treasury, and Housing and Urban Development, as a result of evictions, to give him more grounds and to propose additional legislation to the Senate or the House, and to gather more information right now of how are evictions really being affected in the economy due to the spread of COVID-19. Sounds fair to me. So what I want to do is, number one, we walked through what the eviction, how it came about, what an eviction, what it was specifically talking about, which was up here. And it specifically talk about disproportionate unemployment rates may lead to greater risk of eviction and homelessness or sharing of housing. What does that cause? Homelessness then poses multiple challenges that can exacerbate and amplify the spread of COVID-19. So what did President Trump took action because the HEROES Act of $100 billion wasn't acted on. Evictions aren't addressed in the 8 Senate bills of the HEALS package, which we went through. And all what he is addressing is this is critical to stop the spread of COVID-19, which is the overall goal. Overall goal is to stop COVID-19. As a president, he's saying this needs to stop. Evictions and creating homelessness pose multiple challenges that can amplify the spread of COVID-19. That is the reasoning behind, clearly spelled out here, clearly here which departments of the U.S. Department need to address additional facts and get back to President Trump or and every department and opine on where we can find financial assistance, and then any halting residential eviction tenants for failure to pay are reasonably necessary to prevent further spread. So 2 of them are, in his opinion, as the president, is to prevent further spread of COVID-19 by putting a moratorium on evictions, as he's outlined and explained. And secondly is asking the Treasury Secretary and Secretary of Housing of HUD available funds to provide temporary financial assistance. And temporary is important because only Congress can legislate through the House and the Senate additional funding. So this is federal funds to provide temporary financial assistance, if there are any out there, to specifically address evictions. Okay, let's see. I want to go back to me. So, in summary, there were four executive orders issued by President. Let me back up. 1 executive order, 3 memorandums. The executive order was very specific on addressing the purpose, which was to stop the spread of COVID-19, and evictions was the topic. And when you have evictions, as it was explained in the executive order, when you have it, that could lead to homelessness, and homelessness could further the spread of COVID-19. Very clear. He directed several departments, U.S. departments, HUD and U.S. Treasury to not only address the impact of that spread, but also to find additional federal funding that might be available that could be allocated to this purpose of eviction, to put a moratorium on, which expired July 27th from the CARES Act, enacted March 27th. So to put a moratorium on, so he's gathering facts right now such that a proposal or further proposal can say these are the facts to stop and to greatly deter the spread of the pandemic, COVID-19, which is the impact is not only in economically in our economy, but it's also in the leads to cases and deaths on who contracts the virus. Okay? There you go on an executive order issued August 8th by President Trump. I hope that at least clarifies. I intend to do a follow-up video if and when the departments get back and address this executive order, and then follow up exactly here's what happened. So I'll be monitoring the department sites for any press releases and to bring it to you as quick as I can. Mike Rasmussen, CPA, Straight Talk, Small Business on August 19th, and I will see you tomorrow.